All right. Well, welcome everybody to our October Austin Tug. Thank you everyone for joining us. Today we got a great event. My name is Chris Monahan. I'll be your MC today. And before we get started, as always, I like to thank everyone on our advisory council that works very hard every month to put these events on for you. They're the folks that meet regularly to plan the events, line up the speakers, and just make sure that we have great content for you. I do want to welcome Celia, our newest member. She joined last month, and so if you guys are interested in joining our council, please reach out to us. We're looking for folks that like to do event planning, or if you're a bit savvy with social media, or just want to help in general. Yeah, definitely reach out to myself or anybody else on the advisory council. We'd love to have you join. We meet every 2 weeks on a Zoom to just meet and socialize and also talk about planning the events. And then once a quarter, we do a dinner. We just had one this week. It was great. We had a ton of fun. So if you're in the Austin area and you want to join us, please let us know. All right. So we have a great event planned. Here's today's agenda. We'll go over a little bit of housekeeping events, and then Zach Lieber, the director of analytics at Brainsway, will be doing a great presentation around multifocal distance analysis using spatial sets in Tableau. It's a pretty cool session, so you definitely want to check that out. As always, just a reminder that this is a live meeting, so this is virtual. Please, share your video. We'd love to see your faces, but definitely make sure you're on mute. We do want you guys to leverage the chat window. So if you have any questions, please pose them in chat. And if you have any questions for our speaker, put them in the chat and DM Homer. He's our co-host, and he'll save those till afterwards for the Q&A. And if you ever want to check out our past recordings, or this recording will be up soon, it's on our YouTube channel. So that's the URL down there. Check it out. And there's a lot of great content there as well. So just some brief upcoming announcements. We have our another tug coming up in November, just before Thanksgiving. And then we have our annual December happy hour. This will be in person. This year we'll go back to Lala's. If you've never been to Lala's, it's Christmas every day, year round. It's a great little place. So we had a ton of fun last year. We haven't picked the exact date, but it'll most likely be that second Thursday of December. So we will send that information out on it and have that available on the next tug. Lastly, I want to close with Iron Viz qualifiers are open. So if you have a flair for making awesome looking dashboards and storytelling, please enter. We have a lot of folks, even from our tug, that have participated and made the qualifiers. It's a great event. There's a lot of amazing dashboards out there. This year's theme is entertainment. So if you have a good idea around entertainment, polish up your data and enter in your data, your dashboard by October 31st. All right. And lastly, please join our Slack community. We'll go ahead and put a link in the Slack there, in the chat, with how to join our Slack channel. This is a great little community where we share information, post when the upcoming events are. And if you have any questions in general about Tableau, you can post them there too. All right, that's enough of the housekeeping events. Let's get to the good stuff. So once again, I'd like to introduce Zach Lieber, who is the director of analytics at Brainsway. He is a Tableau Forums ambassador and used to lead the Boston Tug as well for many years. So check him out on LinkedIn and his public profile on Tableau Public. So Zach, I will turn it over to you.
Great. Thanks a lot, Chris. And thanks to Amy and Nicole and Chris for getting me online. I'm really excited to present this to you. I wish I could be there in person with you in Austin. I love Austin. I miss Antone's. I miss the Salt Lick. I miss the Texas Book Festival. My cousin, which is coming up in a couple of weeks, my cousins are out there, and it's a wonderful city. So someday I'll be back, and maybe I can join you at your quarterly in-person meeting. So this work started when I went to TC24 this year in San Diego. It was a fantastic event. It was my first event since 2019. If you weren't there, it really had all the energy that I remember from the old TCs. And I went to a mapping class. It was an intermediate level mapping class, and I started learning a little more about spatial analytics. So I've been using Tableau forever, and I make lots of maps, and I can draw circles and squares on the maps using the lasso methods. But I'd never really done spatial analytics. Tableau makes it easy to do maps, but going to the next level is, I think, something that most people haven't done. And so I wanted a project that would show me and others how to go to the next level with mapping. Next thing is sets. So sets were introduced 5 years, well, sets were introduced 20 years ago, 15, but no one used them. And then set actions were introduced 5 years ago, but they're still confusing to most people. They can't figure out a good use case for them. I couldn't. So I wanted to come up with a good use case for set actions to allow interactive selections. My third goal was to figure out how to make this demo accessible with using real business data, because most Tableau stuff requires that you have lat-long coordinates, and most of us don't have lat-long built into our business data, and we're not GIS experts. And so I'll show you a hack so that you can use Tableau to generate the lat-long coordinates that you need for any business data you have to do all this work. So you don't need to go out to any external sources or buy any databases. And then I'm hoping that you guys at the end of this might even be able to apply this to some actual business problems. For us, we applied it to our service and sales territory optimization. We're looking to add new salespeople, new tech support people to cover our medical device around the country. We use this exact technology to figure out how to optimize the location of our personnel. So it really does work quickly with real business data. That's the message I'm trying to explain. So let's switch into Tableau here and start talking about this. Now, all this, I'm going to give you a QR code and a bit.ly link at the end so you can download everything, including all the notes and workbooks and links to other workbooks. So you don't have to grab screenshots of any of this. It's all really well laid out in an online blog that I'll give you at the end. So let's say you're the mayor of Boston and you've got 35 fire stations in your city, but you can only afford to staff 5 of them for budget concerns. So you got to figure out which fire stations will give you the best proximity to the coverage areas that you need. So this demo, which you can play with online, is telling me that these gray squares here are all of my fire station locations. And the red dots are all my target locations, whether those are fires or fire hydrants that need to be serviced. This is real information from the Boston Fire Department. And so what I want to do is, which of these squares should I staff, assuming a 1.5 mile coverage radius, to get me the maximum coverage? Because I can't staff all of my fire stations. And so this interactive demo lets you add stations to the set. So for example, if I add that station and I add this station, then I can see that my coverage is going up. I'm up to 61%, but I'm using 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 or 8 different stations. So it's an interactive way to try to locate your source locations to maximally cover your targets, whether that's the distance that a salesperson can travel in a day, or that a warehouse can reach by truck in a day, or whatever. In this case, it's how fast can the fire engine reach these fire hydrants to service them. So now I'm going to show you how to take this type of data and build this from scratch using your own business data, or even just the built-in Tableau data. So, and again, all of this stuff is online and interactive. So the first thing that we need to understand is that many of us are used to dragging stuff out into the Tableau window, and we get these longitude and latitude coordinates generated automatically. I call those view level coordinates, but those are dynamically generated. They're only available in the view. We have no access to them, so we can't do any spatial calculations. So what we need to do is eventually we need to get our data into the shape of our source cities or locations, our target locations, and a lat long for both. So this is how we do it. We start out by just going to the Superstore data, for example, and all I've done is I've dragged out, to start, I've just dragged out city from the Superstore data. It brings along state and country with it. So these are all the cities in Superstore. So I've then created a field called city state. And that's because cities are not unique in the United States. And so if I have Albany, there could be multiple Albanys, but city-state is unique. So I'm going to use that as my single dimension, which makes this a little easier to do the demo. So if we take city state now and we drag it onto the filter shelf, and then we'll just filter this by the top 50 cities by sales, which is an approximation, for example, in this case of, say, the top 50 population centers where we might hire a new salesperson. You could do any way you want to get 50 cities here. So now we have 50 cities. And if we go up to Tableau and we do analysis, view data, then we have these cities and we have the lat and the longitude generated show up in the view data window. So now what you will do, and you would do this with your actual business data if you didn't have your own coordinates, you would download this into a file. You would download this to a CSV file. You would open it up in Excel. And the only thing you would do is you would change these two column headings from latitude generated and longitude generated to lat and long. It's a one-time hack to basically get your data. That will prevent confusion later. But just basically download this data, change the column headings to lat and long, and then save that CSV. Do the same thing with your target cities. So here, it's the exact same view, but I've changed my city-state filter to be the top 500 cities. So this demo, we're going to look at how to use the top 50 cities in the US to target the top 500 cities in the US. We're going to cross-join 50 with 500 and get 25,000 rows. So to do that, so now we've got two exports. We do this analysis. We also do a view data. We also open up that file. We rename this to lat and we rename that to long. Then we join those two files. So this is what this would look like if we edited the data source. We have the top 50 CSV, the top 500 CSV. You can do this through a relationship or a proper join. Increasingly, I'm frustrated with relationships in Tableau, and I'm going to a physical join when I think of it, to avoid errors in the future when you get these annoying errors about you can't use blended data. So this data is just the top 50 cities joined with the top 500 cities. And what we've done is an inner join on true equals true. So this is a full cross join, and it will basically create one row for every combination. And as you can see, another advantage of using a proper join rather than a relationship is that your data preview will tell you, I've got 25,000 rows, and you can even see the data all joined here, so that you can see that I've got my source cities with their lat long, and then that's joined with every potential target city and their lat long. So I've got lat and long from each pair of cities on every row, and that's the key. And so this true equals true could be 1 equals 1. You probably have all seen examples of a full cross join, but that's how you force these two files to be joined together. And that becomes that's the hardest part of this whole project, is just getting your data ready. So now I've got a single data source. On every row, I've got source coordinates and target coordinates in latitude and longitude. So now what we can do is we start going into the Tableau spatial calculations. Now that we have row level coordinates rather than view level coordinates, we can use a calculation like this. So this is our source point. So this is creating from our lat long a source point, which is basically a geometric object for Tableau, which we can use in our analysis. So we'll make the source point out of the lat long, which came from the top 50. And then we make our target point out of the lat long that came from the other file. They get these extensions added to them. So now we've got a source point and a target point. We can start doing calculations such as how far apart are those two points. So with these source points and target points, we can now actually put them into our view. So there we've added the source point. And then I'll take the target points and I'll add them as a second marks layer. For the source point, I will convert them to, by default, what you'll notice when you drag a geometry object from Tableau, it wraps it in something called a collection object, which will look okay as long as the mapping type is set to automatic. But if you change it, because I want to show all my sources as squares, then what you'll get, I'm going to remove my target so you see, you'll get a single square in the middle of the country, usually Missouri, because it's actually the center of all those objects. You then have to break them back apart by taking city-state and just dragging it to detail to split those out. And then we'll make those into, say, gray ones. So those are our source points. Then we take our target points, drag those as the second marks layer, and we'll make those into circles. And those came from the top 500. So we need to take the city-state that disaggregates those to split those. So now we've got our squares and our circles. You still might be wondering, why have we done all this work? I can do a two-layer map pretty easily just by dragging out the cities from this. And the reason is that now we can start to do spatial analytics on these points, whereas without having row-level coordinates and these source and target points, we couldn't do that. So this is what it looks like when we've got the cross join. Top 50 cities are gray squares, top 500 cities are blue circles. So let me pause for a second and see if there's any questions already about any confusion or questions so far.
Amanda, but at your earliest convenience, however you want to do it, she sent an email back tomorrow sometime. You can just say, Josh.
Yeah, can you go on mute, Kathy?
That's a different question.
I don't think that's a different question. We might have to mute you. Yeah, there. Well, that's a different question.
Well, I don't know if there are any questions in the chat or any questions so far. Just
Not yet.
Sure everyone's
Not yet.
Up.
We're good.
All right. All right. So now we've got the start of our action. So now we're going to start to create some buffers. So we have a parameter called coverage miles, and it's set to 200. And we are going to use that in a buffer calculation, which is in the next level of geometry. So we go to this and we look at and we create something called source buffer. So source buffer, you call the buffer function, you give it the source point, you give it some distance, which is the parameter 200 in this case, and you give it a unit, miles, feet, inches, whatever you want. It doesn't have you can use any units you want. So this will create a 200-mile buffer around every source point. And if I take that source buffer and drag it in as a third marks layer, I'm now going to get a whole bunch of circles around all my squares. Let's make that yellow and a little more see-through just to get the idea. So now we're looking at, so now we've got these circles that we can center on each of the source points so that we can start to do some in-out calculations. So then we can also, so then now we've added those buffers to the view. So we've got a 3-layer map now, source points, target points, and source buffers. Now we want to start doing some distance calculations. So we'll create a new calculation called close to source. So close to source is a row-level calculation that checks for every row whether the distance between the source point and the target point in units of miles is less than our coverage miles. So this is going to tell us whether the circles are basically inside, our target circles are inside the buffers or not. And then we have, if we want to figure out whether this dot here, for example, is close to a buffer, we have to check all the potential sources, not just each individual one. So we define another function called close to any source. And that, because close to source is a true false, it returns either true or false, max of close to source will return true if it the target point is close to any source. So if any of the sources are close to a target, that will be 1, and close to any source will be true. So then we can take the close to any source and put it on our target point to do the color for the target point. And now we can see that all the target points that are inside one of our buffers are turned orange, and all the ones that are too far away for us to reach are stayed blue. So now we're starting to do, mark-specific calculations that can tell us whether that's in or out. So that's a good, we're doing well now. So these orange dots are inside the buffer and the blue dots are still outside the buffer, and that's all done spatially. Okay, so now this is telling us all the points that are close to any potential of our 50 source cities. But we can't hire 50 salespeople. We don't have the budget. We only have the budget for 5 salespeople. We have to figure out which 5 cities will give us the best coverage. That's the real world. You just can't staff everything. So this is where we temporarily pivot from doing all geometry to figuring out how can we use a set to define which cities are in our set, and then dynamically, by letting the user move around and click, add cities into that set or not. And that's the fun part. So to do that, you go to the primary field, city state, and you create a set. And I've already done that. And what that set does is it lets you define who's in the set and who's out of the set. So for every row for our sources now, they're either in the set or out of the set. And we create set actions by doing worksheet actions to add to set or remove from set when you click on that. I'll let you guys figure that out later. So for example, if we click on one of our potential source where we might want to put someone, I've got 2 menu actions, add to set and remove from set. And that will put that city into the city state set or remove it from that. And so what we've done is that we have switched this from showing the just the buffers to showing selected buffers. And so now if only if that city is selected, if it's in one of these 6 or 7 cities, will we show a buffer. And then we can take our target cities, and we've already got it set. So this is close to a selected source. So you can see that these blue dots out here in Colorado are close to this potential Denver site, but that's not selected, so they're not included. So now we've got an interactive set. It contains 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And as I go through and I add cities to the set, it updates the calculation and colors more things orange, for example. So how do we use this from a calculation point of view? So what we can do is we create a calculation called percent covered, and this happened to work out best using a window calc. And it's basically a window sum of how many of our target points are close to a selected source divided by the total number of points we have. And that's telling me that right now I've got 49% of my points covered. And I like doing these calculations and putting them in the titles of views, because it means I don't have to create a dashboard to create a second set of information. I can have this dynamically updating metric that updates in the title as I add and subtract cities. Now we're up to 51%. I could subtract this one from Denver, for example, and we drop down to 48%. And so now we have this interactive view where we can figure out, based on how many cities we can afford to include in our set for sources, how much coverage can we get? And it becomes an interactive exercise where you use a map along with other knowledge that you may have about your business and the ability to hire people to do this interactively. So let me pause there for a minute. and see if there's some questions so far.
Yeah, I don't see any in the chat right now.
Okay, so this allows you to basically guess at where the next best city was. And it's pretty hard. It's kind of fun, but it's kind of tricky to figure out, okay, well, maybe I should put something down in Houston. That gave me 4%. If I had something here and I added, that's another 3%. So it's kind of an interactive exercise. It's pretty hard to optimize this. But after using this for a while, I figured out we can actually use Tableau to actually solve this problem for us. Now, to accurately solve this problem, you need to do something like linear programming. But to interactively solve this problem using graphics and a really clever calculation I'm about to show you, we can have Tableau tell us the next best city to choose. So this is really slick. This is called best next city, not next best city, but best next city. So this calculation, let me show you the key to the calculation. Targets covered is just simply the number of targets that I will get covered based on that city. But targets added is the magic calculation. And that's telling me how many cities would be added to my collection if I added that are not already being covered by any other source. So it's basically summing up if the new target is close to a source and it's not already close to an existing selected source, then 1. So now you'll see, if you look at this table, for example, that if I added Lafayette, I would add 56 cities, but only 21 of those would be unique because something else is already covering it. So the next best city to add would actually be Henderson, Kentucky, because I get 24 new cities. So let me show you how this looks in practice. And you add that onto a dashboard, and I'm actually going to clear my list and start from scratch. I've got no coverage. The very best place I should put someone is Yonkers. Now look at this. It's telling me that my top 3 choices should be Yonkers, Long Beach, California, and then New York City. But as soon as I choose Yonkers and I add that to the set, then New York is no longer anywhere close to my next best option because it's right next door. So now it's telling me I should go to Jackson, Michigan. And now it's telling me I should go to California. So you can actually use this to optimally select. If you can only afford 3 salespeople, these 3 salespeople will get you the most targets covered with a choice of 3. And so this lets you interactively, it guides you to where you can select the next best city. So what we use this for, when I showed this to my service and my sales department, was we were about to add a couple new salespeople and a couple new service people. So we were able to map the existing set of individuals, and then we figured out where should we add a couple service people or add a couple of salespeople to be able to get significantly boost our overall coverage of our target cities. So we've combined spatial analytics with interactive set actions that you can trigger off of the menu, or you could trigger them off of a click. I wish there was a way that you could click to add and then click to subtract, but you can't do that. So the click to add, and then you still have to use a menu option to remove. But this dashboard then lets you dynamically do this for any of your data. So we didn't use Superstore data in our example. We took our Salesforce data that had our customer locations, no lat long in there. We exported that, or we brought the Salesforce data into Tableau. We mapped it. We did view data to export the lat long, and then we read that in, and then we joined our actual customer data with another set we had with basically top 50 cities in the US, because that might be where we could hire someone. We cross-joined the top 50 cities with our actual 1,000 customers, and then used this to figure out the mapping. The only other thing that these set actions benefit from, a lot of times there are these leftover highlights that you'll get. So if we go back to one of these other views, for example, you can get these highlight states where the view stays grayed out and so you have to do a little bit of extra work to get the view to properly refresh after you do an add or subtract set action. And that's what we've done over here. There's a refresh action, which is thoroughly described in the blog that I'll link you to, as well as the article that refreshes this so you don't have that artifact and you're ready to just go to your next city without having to deselect. So it does some highlighting actions in order to make the view interact a little better with the mouse clicks. Those are described in more detail in the blog, which I'll link to in a few minutes. So let's pause there. Because that's actually near the end of this part of the presentation. And let me start explaining how some of these things work, or questions, or why did you do it that way versus this way? Yeah, any questions are quite welcome.
Yeah, no, I actually had a question. So so I guess the target added is sort of is that the secret sauce calculation there?
For this dashboard, that when I figured out how to do that LOD calculation, or like how targets added, because you can see targets covered is easy, but targets added, right? There's that was the key, and I'll put that calculation back up because that was and we'll just go over it again. So it's summing up. So for every it's summing up how many cities are close to that source that are not already close to a selected source.
Gotcha.
And
Gotcha.
yeah, so that targets added was the secret sauce that said how good relative to all the other ones that are already in. These won't add any because they're already covered. That's why these automatically go to 0, because they're now covered. And then these will then show you the next best place to go, or the best next city. It has to wait until you select that next city, and then it recalculates everything. So it can't give you the top 10 to go to, but in order, you select 1, then it'll tell you where to go for 2, then 3, then 4, then 5. So if you were trying to do it for optimization purposes, you would use this. If you just wanted an interactive view and you wanted to use set actions to basically select marks. So this is, although this is focusing on spatial analytics, you could imagine many other use cases, and I've had them, where I want to take out of 20 marks on my screen, I want to add 5 of them to a set. I want to consider transferring those to another person, or I want to update those. And so being able to interactively click marks, add them to a set, and then export that set so that you can do more with it, are some of the nice features about being able to dynamically create sets.
Yeah.
So,
No, this is super cool. Yeah, is there a version, or could there be a version of this dashboard that says like, what are the locations, given that I want to open 6 offices, what's the optimal, where are those locations to give me the optimal coverage?
right.
I don't know how practical that is, because it might have me putting like offices in remote locations, right, in order to get maximum coverage. I don't know, but
no, I think so. No, to get all 6 with what at once, you would have to do. That's a complicated computer science problem. But as long as you're willing to click the first, and then it will tell you the second best and the third best, like we did here.
Yeah, a little more practical.
You can come up with it. So because it can calculate one at a time, I do believe that going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 will get you the same optimization as like linear programming would get you if you were just able to select any 5 and could find them. I think it's probably gets you pretty close to what's optimal.
And again, I don't even know how practical that is. Yeah, even again, you might have offices in locations you don't really necessarily want to.
Oh no, because it's not gonna stick, because out here, in Montana, there's only 3 target cities, but here in Denver, there's like 10 cities on top of it, and so it's naturally going to steer you towards the more densely populated areas because you'll have suburban cities near there, where you have your customers. And so
Yeah.
it does not stick. If you look at where we ended up in California, Georgia, Colorado, Michigan, Texas, Washington, and then New York.
New York,
And
yeah.
it spatially sent us all around to the highest population areas, and it did a pretty nice job.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. Great. Well, yeah. Any other questions from the group?
Yeah, there's a couple from Celia. Celia, do you want to ask them
Great.
yourself?
Please.
Sure, you bet. So I learned Tableau a long time ago, so there may be like this may be a legacy thing, but I was always taught to and have taught lots of people to change their lat long to discrete rather than leaving it continuous. And I noticed, and I have also seen this before where you use the city state to cause it to give that detail after averaging
Yep.
it back up. And I'm just
Right.
curious if that was a
So
purposeful decision.
I've never heard of a reason to switch the generated long lat from green continuous to blue discrete. We are exporting them into a CSV, and that
Yeah.
doesn't care. And then we're reading them back in. And when they come back in, well, it looks like they're coming back in also as green.
Yeah, they are coming back in as discrete
So
as continuous.
I haven't found the need to switch them to discrete. I don't know
What would
what
give
the
you that?
advantages are.
So to be fair, I don't think you can do it with the generated ones, but once you have them in a field that you're a column that you're bringing in yourself, you can switch them to discrete, and that will give you the detail without having to put the categorical value with it in that you drug into detail. But I just wanted to know if that was
Oh,
just
okay.
your.
Well, that's something new I learned. I didn't know that if we did that, then we wouldn't necessarily have to split them back apart by using that city state. I use city state just because, we could have done this with zip codes and then we wouldn't have needed city state, but people know where city states are. We know where
Yeah,
Anaheim,
right.
California is. And so, but it's a little awkward, but it's very handy to have this combo. And for those of you wondering why well, there's so many legacy features in Tableau, but
Right.
let me go back to where city state was defined way
And I
back
think that was an
here.
excellent idea because otherwise you've got so many nulls you have to work with, right?
So I created city state the old-fashioned way by just manually mashing these two together. Now, Tableau has a million features, and one of them is you can create a combined dimension. You can actually select city and state, and you can merge them into like a combined field. I thought, oh, that's interesting. But very quickly, some of these legacy features, like I could not create a set out of my combined field, which was awkward. And you have similar problems when you do groups. Groups are really nice because you can interactively drag things around in and out of groups. But then when you go to try to use that group in some calculations, they don't work as well. So sometimes I've had to do groups manually using case statements instead of doing the interactive. So that's why I created my city state field by hand rather than using this combined field feature that Tableau offers. It's pretty obscure. They wouldn't turn into a set for me.
Gotcha. That's good to know. My other question was, do you mind giving a little bit of a preview? I know it's probably really well documented in your blog, but of the menu set actions for the tooltip. I
Oh,
thought
yeah,
that was
the menu.
extremely clever what you did there.
So the set actions for adding and subtracting are super easy. Let's start those. The ones that are messy are the highlight reverse. So let's just go to worksheet actions and so add to set. I have it on menu. Target is the city state set. That's the source set. Running the action will add values. Clearing will not clear it because I want to be able to click and move on to the next one. So the edit set action to add looks like that. And the remove is exactly the same, except it's removed down here. Originally, I wanted it to be on select because then you could just click it, but then it would mean that adding was a click and removing was a menu option. So for consistency, I put them both on the menu.
Well, that's really nice. Thank you.
Yeah, and then, but this thing on reselect, which is a little funky, is well documented this thing that targets a field to undo the highlighting. I explain that further online, and I even reference someone else's blog where I picked it up, and he goes into more detail about how that works as well.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Sure, sure. What other questions?
Any other questions,
Uh,
Homer?
Yeah, I don't see any right now. So folks in the audience, this is your last call.
Well, you're welcome to come back. I want to show you. So in the audience, I think in June, or somehow, I'm not sure how Stanley Guy found all this, but you can use this QR code, which I created, and this bit.ly, which I created, which will link. So a month or two after I presented this in June, Stanley Guy came up with an extension to what I did called the Comic Shops game. And it's really cool. And it lets you choose where to put your comic shops. And it's got a couple other parameters like rent or something, but it's interactive and it's basically a spatial set tool, and it's a fun tool, and you can go play with that on Tableau Public. You go to bit.ly comic-shops-game, or use that QR code. And if this is my stuff, so the online article for spatial sets, which explains everything I did, plus gives you a link to Tableau Public where you can download that workbook and play with it, is right here, bit.ly spatial sets. And then I have a couple other articles on other smaller topics. If you want to see my whole profile, a couple other links, or get in touch with me through LinkedIn or through the Tableau forums. Or if you have any trouble, you can just go through one of the organizers of the Austin Tug, and they can get in touch with me. I really want to hear from you, and I'm happy to answer your individual questions about getting this to work with your business data. That's what I like the most, is making sure you can apply this to your use case. I know a bunch of people from Boston were able to apply it to their use cases, and I want to enable you guys to do that as well. So please don't consider this the end of the presentation, but just like the intro. Contact me and I'll go one-on-one with you on your workbook. That's kind of my job as a Tableau Forums ambassador, to help people level up their skills. So I'd love to hear from anybody.
All right. All right. Well, thank you, Zach. And you heard, everybody out there heard, if you have any questions, reach out to Zach. He's there to help the community, especially as a forums ambassador. So let's give Zach a round of applause, everybody. Virtual round of applause. Thank you very much, Zach. We appreciate you taking the time. We'd love to have you back, especially if you visit the Austin area. Let us know. We'll grab
I
some barbecue
will.
or something
Yeah,
like that.
that'd be
Yeah.
great, Chris. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. All right.
Welcome.
Yeah. Well, that was a fantastic presentation. Again, Zach, just an amazing presentation. And if you want to learn more, check out his blog, and you can also follow him on Tableau Public as well. So